Hello everyone, my name is Denise and today I'll be doing a book review on this. Warning, Psychiatry Can Be Hazardous to Your Mental Health by William Glasser. Okay, so to be honest, this book is actually a textbook. I'm doing my level 4 for my CTRT certification right now, so I'm reading this book. And I finished reading this book, so might as well do a book review for it. Okay, so a background on William Glasser. He is an American, born 1925 and lived up to 2013. He's a psychologist/psychiatrist. So he was trained in psychology before he became a psychiatrist. And then he's the founder of choice theory. Choice theory can be applied to psychotherapy, that would be called reality therapy. It can be applied to management, that's called lead management. And it can apply to schools, that would be called quality schools. If you're familiar with Enneagram, he is clearly an Enneagram type 5, which means he's somewhat of an iconoclast. He forms his own paradigm and framework to think about this whole business of mental health or psychopathology. Okay, so I love him, and to be honest, I didn't start loving him immediately. Okay, because my first exposure to him was reading the blue book, the choice theory book. And Glasser, he writes in a not a very scientific way. He's an avid reader, but he writes in a very down-to-earth, popular culture way. So for a long time, I thought that choice theory is all popular culture, jargon and all that. I mean, there's nothing really solid on it. But that all changed when I went to school and they taught it during class, and I started to see William Glasser in all his role plays. Some of his role plays, and I started to even have my own experience in the psychiatric clinic working with neurotic and psychotic patients. Then I started to realize that Glasser was and probably is right. So that made me fall in love with reality therapy. Okay, enough raving about reality therapy. Let me just dive right into the book review. Okay, let's take a look at page 54. Mentally healthy people don't accept that suffering is an unavoidable part of life. They see their suffering as a warning that right now I'm very unsatisfied with one or more of the important relationships in my life. Mentally healthy people pay attention to that warning. They know that if they were to get back to being happy, they must take a good look at what they and not the others are choosing to do in all their close relationships. Okay, so there are a couple of concepts in this passage that I just read. Firstly, one of the axioms of choice theory is that most of our current problems are caused by relationships. Alright, okay. That makes sense to me because I'm a very agreeable person, and by watching Glasser in his video recordings, I can sense that he's also a very agreeable person. So people like us who are very high in agreeability, relationships are we really like people more than things, okay? Intimate relationships are a must. So Glasser is like that, and he based his whole choice theory on that. Like, you really need solid relationships, you need intimate relationships, you need that connection. And if any of your close relationships are threatened or not in a very good place, you start to have mental health issues. Like you might become neurotic, anxiety, depressing, or even psychosis, which I will show you an example later. So that's one part. The second part is an emphasis on self. Whose behavior can you control? Only your own. So if the relationship is unhappy, there's really no point wasting effort trying to manipulate or control that person to change their behaviors. You need to change your own first. There's still a big chunk of the power that's on your end, things that you can do to make the relationship better. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm just going to flip one page. I'm not too far. Just flip one page to page 57. A more accurate title for DSM-4 would be The Big Red Book of Unhappiness. No matter how we experience it, almost every symptom can be traced back to its origin. Relationships that lack love, respect, or both. By making choices that help us stay connected with each other, the unhappiness can be overcome. Caring and respecting, never controlling, are the cornerstones of mental health. To put simply, okay, remember the presupposition? Relationships are key importance, the agreeable person paradigm. So love, respect, good. External control, bad. Don't try to control or manipulate, that's really bad. When you try to control others, or when you're the recipient of other people trying to control you, that leads to unhappiness, bad. Instead, focus on loving people, respecting them. All right? Okay. Next up. Okay, next up we talk about this patient that has fibromyalgia. So fibromyalgia is one of those iffy diagnoses. Okay, what it means is just muscle pain with unknown origin. Right? It means the person might have like very severe back pain or any kind of muscle pain. Did the whole body scan and all that, you can't find any problem. So usually it's parked under the job of a psychiatrist to deal with the fibromyalgia. There must be something that's unhappy or psychologically not so well with that person. That's why she's having all these physical symptoms. Alright? So this is really moving on to a bit more of a challenging ground, right? Like, can we actually choose our own physical symptoms and physical pain? And are we actually choosing to be in physical pain? So according to Glasser, in a way, yes. Not consciously choosing, but our subconscious is generating these symptoms as a warning sign that you're unhappy, there's some relationship that's not going well right now, you need to change something in your life, otherwise the warning sign every day, which is the fibromyalgia, will keep telling you need to change, right now you're not at the right place. Alright? So, okay, in this case, this lady is having fibromyalgia because she has a very perfect picture of herself in the quality world. Alright? So I'm going to read a passage. Since she can control her own behavior, she has to change the perfect picture of herself that she has put in the quality world to a less perfect picture. So, okay, I use myself as an example. I am a perfectionist to some extent, or when I was younger I was more so, now I'm less. So a common way that a perfectionist might think is that I must be perfect 100% of the attributes. Maybe physically I have to be perfect, or the way I talk, the way I behave has to be perfect, right? I must be polite to people at all times, I must be very considerate, and my weight has to be spot on. I cannot be too heavy or too light. I need to be this beautiful number. So if I want to control so many aspects of myself and that they have to be perfect 100% of the time, I'm really just setting myself up for failure, because there's no perfect person. They just don't exist. Even robots have down times, right? So if I continue to think that way, I'll be frustrated most of the time. And if I'm frustrated most of the time, it might translate to a physical symptom. Like in this case, the lady is having fibromyalgia, and for me, I had migraine headaches. So a way of fixing that would be to alter the image, to do this cognitive restructuring. Yes, it's a CBT term, but it can also apply CBT, cognitive restructuring. You can actually do it under the choice theory rubric as well, and I do that often. Okay, so what it means is that now I tell myself, Denise, you don't have to be perfect. Maybe not 100%. Okay, let's start to lower it slowly. Okay, how about lower it down to 90%? Only 90% of the times you need to be perfect, and not perfect in every way. 90% is good enough. Or your weight, there's a bit of fluctuation, that is alright. Or you got a pimple today, that is alright, that's okay. It's just part of being human. There's no perfect person. And it makes sense because, especially when it comes to looks, right? Like every day I get more wrinkles, and it's just it's a downward slope from here, you see. If I keep my expectations very high, then I'm just fighting a losing battle. So it's time to alter the quality world image picture of myself. So maybe I just pause and tell you a little bit about quality world. Your quality world is like a collage, an amalgam of all the things that you find pleasing, pleasurable, and good in your life. So it can consist of all your relationships, or maybe even the job that you love. Like for me, it will consist of all my beloved clients, and also my hobbies, running, reading. All these are all in my quality world. But in my quality world, there's also an image of myself, which is usually more idyllic than the real Denise, right? So when there is a discrepancy, then so-called my skills are out of balance, I will feel frustrated. So when I have a more realistic image of myself in the quality world, then I'll be less frustrated. Alright? Okay, moving on. I'm going to move on to the most juicy part right now. The main question we're going to discuss here is, are we able to generate psychotic symptoms like auditory hallucinations to meet our needs? So from this case study, maybe. Okay, so there's a part of the book, the last few chapters, that are actually not written by Glasser. So there's this chapter written by L. Seibert. He's a psychologist working around the same time as Glasser. So he contributed his own personal experience, right? So he finished his, he was doing his doctorate studies. So it was attached to this psychiatric hospital. So there was this one patient called Molly. She's a nursing student. So all her life she has been rejected by her parents. Okay, her father had been a musician, so she took up the clarinet in high school. She thought that it would please him. I was excited, she said. I believed my father would be proud of me. When he came home that night, I told him that she got first chair for clarinet. But he got angry. He picked up my clarinet and smashed it across the kitchen and yelled at me, "You'll never amount to anything." So okay, after that, when she grew to an appropriate age, she went to nursing school. She wanted to be people-pleasing and to please her clients, no, her patients. But two of her patients, the two women that she was serving in the hospital room, criticized her. So she felt that I just couldn't do anything right. I'm not such a good person. I'm never good enough. So in choice theory language, her power need is frustrated, and possibly her love and belonging need as well. After that, she went to look for her boyfriend, who decided to tell her, "Nope, I'm still young. I want to date other women. So nope, you're not coming to stay with me." So she moved back home, and her parents also gave her a really bad scolding for dropping out of nursing school. So at that time, that was the time she started to hear the voice of God. What an awful feeling. And then God spoke to you? Yes, she said in a soft voice. How did you feel after God gave you the good news? Molly looked at me with a warm inner radiance and smiled. I felt like the most special person in the whole world. That's a nice feeling, isn't it? Yes, it is. There it was, confirmation of my hypothesis. Her feelings of esteem had been driven to an extreme low, very low power need. It's met very low. Some inner psychological mechanism reversed it to an extreme high. 2 days later, I went up to the locked ward to pick up a patient scheduled for testing. When Molly saw me, she walked up to me and said, I've been thinking about what we talked about, and I've been wondering, do you think I imagined God's voice to make myself feel better? I was amazed. I didn't intend to do therapy, but she seemed to see the connection. Perhaps, I said, shrugging and smiling. So L. Seibert, the psychologist, started to see that human beings can even generate psychotic symptoms to meet their needs. So in this case, she really felt very unloved and wanted by everyone. Then she heard God's voice affirming her that she's wanted and that she's loved. Of course, that got her admitted into the mental ward, because oh wow, you're psychotic now, you're hearing voices. But in a way, at that time, she felt comforted. So in just this very short interview, it wasn't even meant to be therapy. She so-called got cured, because later it talks about Molly's journey. She got cured and she was discharged because she realized that she's not actually crazy. It was just that she was in a very low point, and that's her way that the body, remember I said the body can generate migraine headaches and fibromyalgia. It can also generate psychotic symptoms. It's controversial, right? So remember, this is sharing about L. Seibert's experience a couple of decades ago. And at that time, after he found that, he shared this hypothesis with some of his colleagues as well as his wife. And it's quite shocking, because he was admitted into the hospital after that for acute paranoid schizophrenia. And the symptom is this thing, loose associations. They said that he has loose associations, and because his paradigm was totally different, that human beings can actually generate psychotic symptoms to fulfill their needs. And so yeah, his diagnosis was acute paranoid schizophrenia. He was admitted and for a few weeks. So he closed with this: psychiatrists cannot distinguish between someone having a transformational breakthrough and an emotional breakdown. Yeah, that was his closing. So that's L. Seibert. I think in a way his journey resembles a bit of William Glass's journey, because both of them, their paradigm is very different from the mainstream, and also as a result, although they are, Glasser himself is well loved by many, including myself, but he's also considered quite a controversial figure. Okay, I'm just going to close with this. In my work as a counselor, I deal with both neurotic and psychotic patients. I realized that I just hate to say this because it's quite judgmental, but I'll say it. A lot of people in my field, they're actually scared of the patients. Especially if the patient come in with a label like psychosis, or the patient has an anger management issue, they are so scared of the patient that they have this thing called crazy talk. They have a filter. Like, this is the way I'll talk to a crazy person to protect myself from their attacks. Or I'm just scared and I cannot hide my fear. Something like that. And the patient, they have empathy still. They can feel that you're scared of them. So implicitly, you are condemning them by the label that the psychiatrist has given them. So when they come for counseling, instead of having a kind of empathy and validation, what they get is an implicit condemnation that you'll always be crazy. There's something wrong with you. I'm afraid of you. And that's why I'm talking in this special way, preserved and reserved for crazy people like you. So that can be quite hurtful. So I never do that. In my practice, my aim is always to talk to them as if I'm talking to my best friend. Okay, if I want to phrase it in a different way, if Glass's theory is truly correct, then perhaps we could say that there are many parts of us, and one part of us is capable of acting crazy when required, either to fulfill a need or to prevent further suffering. Like, if I act crazy, it can get my parents off my back. I don't want to be controlled by them, so I'm acting crazy. Okay, so there's one part of me, even within the needs, that has that capacity to act crazy, given in the correct stimulus, or the correct environmental circumstances. If I'm always looking at that act crazy part of the niece with a form of fear, of ambivalence, and I'm treating her as if she deserves to be warded or to be cordoned off in a prison, then I'm not being very loving towards that part of myself. She might start to feel very unwanted. So I want to be not only kind towards my patients, but also kind first to that part of myself, right? So that eventually my kindness towards my crazy side can be translated towards my kindness towards all the clients and patients I see daily. I think that's an important new revelation. Okay, that's all for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, kindly press like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and God bless.